speak actually more broadly, try and address some of these questions, because I think a theme that's going to emerge this morning is interconnection, how everything is interconnected. So I think we can all agree we're living in the strangest of times. At times we're all wondering what might happen next, not just on Zoom, but more broadly in the world. What's going to happen next between the growing climate and ecological crisis and the pandemic, obviously, and then the madness we see in terms of political projects such as Brexit and Trump. On top of that, we see a mounting financial crisis, and the stark reality is that if businesses can't get back to normal, some kind of normality soon, some governments are not going to be able to sustain debt levels, and the job losses and the ability to pay for social services, social health services in the longer term is going to really reach a crunch point. And I think as we're heading into this winter in particular, there's a growing sense of a gathering storm in our world today. It appears, certainly from my own perspective, that time seems to have sped up and at the same time slowed down in strange ways. In the face of this, there are plenty of reasons to despair. I think we are witnessing amongst people an overwhelming sense of powerlessness. And when you think back to the fact that only a year ago, the tremendous sense of power and agency that young people were experiencing in terms of the climate marches and the sense of engagement in politics and citizenship, it's very tragic to see the growing levels of powerlessness and despair as we're seeing these crises intertwine. You just need to think about the pictures we're seeing on our television screens this year of people facing unprecedented forest fires or hurricanes and trying to deal with those emergencies while in face masks and social distancing in the midst of another crisis. The problems, these just seem too big, and responses are too late to stop this sense of an intertwining crisis. In many ways, it can seem like we're edging towards two cliffs of economic meltdown and climate meltdown. And the sense of agency as global citizens can seem lost. How did we get here? And that's a very depressing picture, and I won't end on the depressing picture for sure. But how did we get here? And obviously in a 2-minute discussion, hopefully the whole morning we can discuss this. But I just want to pinpoint a couple of reasons why we're here, like root causes. I think the current situation, whilst hugely complex, and there's many causes, there stems from quite simple yet profoundly misplaced assumptions that have come to dominate our lives in society. And these simple assumptions have huge implications. The first is that it is possible to grow the economy infinitely on a finite planet. And the corollary of this is that market principles, narrowly defined in terms of profitability, are the most efficient mechanism to distribute finite world resources, or infinite world resources, if you believe that assumption. The second assumption is that human activity is primarily driven by self-seeking individuals, not as collectives acting for the common good. This takes primacy. These two assumptions take primacy in so many levels of society, decision-making, and public narratives. The deeper problem underpinning these is one of fragmentation of knowledge at all levels of our society, and the prevalence of one way of knowing over all others. One paradigm that dominates the other paradigms. It's not that the evidence to counter these basic assumptions doesn't exist. It exists in spades. You just have to look outside the door of a narrowly defined economic paradigm to see that other ways of thinking, being, planning, problem solving exist. However, our business world, our politics, and our lives to some extent are dominated, if not suffocated, by this narrow values framework. So where do we move forward in this? And obviously that's a very succinct summary. In the midst of this madness, and I define it as a madness, it's like a psychosis we're facing today, I want to focus on the idea of hope, of cultivating hope. Where can we find hope? And we urgently need to find this in ourselves, in each other, and in society. As time is short, I'll just point to three ways that three areas that give me hope in view of coming up with and promoting an ecosystem of hope. Whilst this paradigm is so prevailing, there are there's a deep sense of rupture in this prevailing paradigm. There are many people, institutions, and initiatives that are truly responding to these deep-rooted economic tunnel vision and fragmentation. I'll just name them just now and we can discuss them later. The first is the culture of local neighbourliness, friendship and kindness that has emerged and broken through this paradigm of self-interest during the pandemic. One of the challenges we face now is to say, how can this become the new normal? The second is a whole new school of economic thinking on how we can live within the Earth systems and build a sustainable and just economy, the donut economy model. And the third area that I would highlight is the translation of the divestment movement and the ethical screening movement into the rise of a new values-based investor movement. In conclusion, at this juncture in history, we need to choose which future we want to be part of. As Joanna Macy famously said, we need to decide, are we part of the great unraveling or the great turning? And I personally think that we'll look back on 2020 and realise that the falling apart we're seeing today had to happen in order for the great turning to come about. Thank you.